In today's video, we'll explore what the rich people ate and drank during the Middle Ages, including some of the most extravagant dishes they feasted on. In medieval Europe, food wasn't just fuel, it was a status symbol. For the elite, hosting a banquet was a way to show off wealth, control, and influence. The wealthiest hosts would spare no expense, sourcing ingredients from across the world. During banquets, servants would bring out course after course of exotic dishes. Spices. The use of spices in medieval European cuisine was extensive, especially among the rich, and signified more than just culinary preference. It was a symbol of wealth and global trade connections. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, cloves, ginger, and nutmeg were imported over vast distances. By the time these spices reached Europe, they were incredibly expensive, often worth their weight in gold, making their use a display of the host's wealth. Spices were used to season and preserve meat. The rich frequently added spices to wines and desserts. Saffron, the most expensive spice, was particularly popular, used to give dishes a golden hue, a color associated with divinity and royalty. While today sugar is a common commodity, in the medieval period, it was an exotic luxury reserved for the rich. Sugar reached Europe through trade, particularly following the Crusades in the 11th and 12th centuries. Wealthy families used sugar to create extravagant dishes and desserts, which included marzipan, candied fruits, and elaborate sugar sculptures known as subtleties. Subtleties were often crafted to resemble castles, animals, or biblical scenes, and were presented between courses to entertain and impress guests. Meat. For medieval European nobility, meat was the centerpiece of their diet and a powerful symbol of their status. While peasants primarily consumed grains and vegetables, the elite feasted on a variety of meats. Venison, deer meat, was a prized dish, as hunting was a privilege reserved for the nobility. For instance, the forest law in England restricted hunting rights in royal forests to the upper classes, making venison a valuable delicacy. Other meats included wild boar, rabbits, hares, and game birds like pheasant, partridge, and swan. Exotic birds like peacock and heron were not only eaten, but often roasted and served in their feathers to impress guests with their colorful plumage. Feasting on large quantities of meat was a way for the elite to emphasize their dominance over both the land and the animals. Roasts of whole animals, such as pigs or oxen, would be presented with great ceremony with dramatic flair. Beverages. Water was often unsafe to drink, and while peasants might drink watered-down ale, the wealthy indulged in wine. Wine was a mark of sophistication, and the rich often had access to a variety of wines from different regions. The wine was flavored with spices, herbs, and even honey, creating concoctions like hippocras, a type of spiced wine, and mulled wine. In regions like England and Scandinavia, where grapes were harder to grow, mead was also popular among the rich. The process of wine production was often labor-intensive, and vineyards were controlled by monasteries, kings, or nobility, making access to high-quality wine in Northern and Eastern Europe limited to the elite. Wine also featured heavily in religious rituals, further reinforcing its association with the upper class and sacred consumption. Feasts. Medieval feasts for the rich were opulent events, often lasting several hours and consisting of multiple dishes, sometimes 20 or more. The purpose of these feasts was not just to eat, but to display the host's wealth, power, and generosity. The banquet hall itself would be decorated lavishly, and the presentation of food was theatrical. Dishes were elaborately garnished, sometimes shaped into mythical creatures. These events also often featured subtleties, elaborate edible sculptures designed to entertain and impress guests with their artistry, often showcasing allegorical or biblical themes. One extravagant dish of the medieval period was the cockentrice. This dish involved sewing together the upper half of a suckling pig and the lower half of a capon, a type of large castrated rooster, to create a chimera-like creature. The whole thing was then roasted and presented as a fantastical centerpiece at royal or noble banquets. It embodied the medieval taste for spectacle and display. Blancmange was a dish made from shredded chicken, rice, almond milk and sugar, cooked together to form a creamy, porridge-like consistency. This seemingly odd combination of savory and sweet flavors was highly prized by the medieval aristocracy. The dish's name, which means white dish in Old French, referred to its pale color, which symbolized purity and refinement. Blancmange was often served at the conclusion of a banquet, especially during times of religious fasting when meat was limited, as it could be adapted to fit the church's dietary restrictions. Bread. Bread was a universal staple of medieval European diets, but like many other foods, its quality was heavily stratified by class. The rich consumed manchet bread, which was made from the finest sifted wheat flour, producing a soft white loaf. In contrast, peasants ate coarse dark bread made from rye, barley, or even acorns in times of famine. Manchet bread was highly refined and expensive because wheat was not as widely grown as other grains, making it a luxury item in many parts of Europe. Bread was also used as a trencher, a type of edible plate on which stews and meats were served. After absorbing the juices and sauces, these bread trenchers were often eaten at the end of the meal, or in some cases, given to servants or the poor. Fish. While we might not associate porpoise and whale with medieval European cuisine today, both sea creatures were considered delicacies in certain regions, particularly during religious fasting periods. The church classified these animals as fish, which meant they could be eaten during times when meat was forbidden. Porpoises, in particular, were prized at the royal table in England, and dishes like porpoise pie were made using their meat, combined with spices and sweet flavors like fruit. Whale meat was a prestigious dish. The fatty, rich meat of the whale was preserved by salting or drying. While it was not an everyday meal, when served at noble feasts, whale was a symbol of luxury, with the rarity and difficulty of procuring it adding to its allure. Lamprey, a jawless fish resembling an eel, was highly prized in medieval Europe, especially in England and France. It was considered a delicacy among the nobility. Cooked lamprey was often presented in elaborate pies or stews. Lamprey was traditionally served during Lent and other fasting periods. Its rich, meaty texture made it a favorite of monarchs, and serving it at banquets was a clear signal of affluence and refined taste. If you found this episode interesting, be sure to watch our other video about the diets of medieval peasants. Thanks for watching.